Locho sampo pa gyu trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngonda pelge drolora zampe ze parache pande alame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Kar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarvasin Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Kar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Kar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedus Seji Ningne Solwa Debe Tse Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshun Yela Sambe Dudem Malupa Gemel Hunge Drupra Jinge Lo Soni Sodan Digne Shabet Dinge Namkeyin So Lekshun Lapchen Soni Yonso Zopa Dan Cherani Tun Chamra Jingel Chancho Parginin Sen Tukun Tu New Peme Siudru Lekshun Chancho Drube Gegen Kunshishi Tungen de la Drupra Jingelo Dagi Lona Chola Chopa Dan Chemi Samjur Ngemba Shiva Tube Duduma Lupa Bemel Hunge Drupra Jingel Dorna Tingne Tsirava Tamche Dan Techi Pardune Kav Tamche Rese Kyamne Lama Kele Me Tukche Chinge Dala Siksu So Gongyab Drewe Nyamda Dajal Jetsun Lame Tuche Rab Gongne Kudan Sunge Nawa Drame To Nyamsunyongwe Kesan Toprash Kewa Kunto Yanda Lama Dan Drame Cheki Pela Longchech Sadan Lamge Yente Rabzon Dorje Change Kopa Nyur Tobe Sho Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Pakyuke Sungdan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tukdan Dagi Ye Tuen Yerme Chiktu Jingi Lu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Makyuke Sungdan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tukdan Dagi Tuen Yerme Chiktu Jingi Lu Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsochi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drubrasho Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchin Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drubrasho Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchin Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Trola Pinchera Sangye Druparasho. Nel Buddha, nel Dharma e nel Sangha prendo rifugio fino all'illuminazione. Con la pratica della generosità e delle altre perfezioni possa io ottenere lo stato di Buddha per il beneficio di tutti gli esseri senzienti. Sashi Pöge Chukshi Medo Trama Rirabling Shinide Gembadi Sangye Shindu Mikte Ulvarge Drugunamda Shingla Cheparasho Yedamang Guru Radna Mandrala Kamniryatayami Haye Kedan Ludan Chinke Rubundandami Kenamdam Drowa Kunge Ranamachi Tsampa Tamche Ketu Dage Chutento
Good morning. First of all, today I wanted to start by explaining briefly a little bit of what we do at the beginning of meetings like today, because there are things that that become like just habits. You know, often we just do them because it's something that is done. But maybe we don't learn about the actual function. And within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we have enormous amount of symbolism and things. And as Westerners, as coming into contact with a new reality, we have this kind of curiosity, because maybe someone who was born in Tibet within this tradition, just takes for granted certain things and doesn't really ask much about it. Like an Italian who's born Catholic goes into church and just takes many things for granted because that's just the way it's always been. That's the way it is. And we have the, let's say, good fortune to not have been born Buddhists. So for us, it's important for us to understand certain things that we don't take for granted. And we see this in history. And every time a tradition needs to adapt itself to a new reality, then it gets renewed. Because when we start taking things because then after a while things are taken for granted. So let's just look. Of course, we can't talk about everything, but not because we can't, but just because it would be too long. But let's just start with let's look at a couple things. When we began today, for example, one of the first things we do is that when he who teaches or she who teaches enters the room, everyone, those who are there to listen, stand up as a sign of respect, not respect for the person, but for respect for coming into contact with the teachings of Buddha. So, given that we respect the teachings of Buddha, then we respect he or she who transmits those teachings. When I respect someone, I give value to his presence. And if I give value to his presence, I give value to what he or she says, and giving worth to that, then there's a greater chance that I'm actually going to put into practice. So then we're able to apply those concepts to our lives better if we have respect for who has taught them. Then many people. And then we do prostrations, and then I sat down and I snapped my fingers. What does this represent? On my side, as an act of humility, to remind myself that I'm here to represent the lineage, to represent a system, a spiritual family. Let's call it a lineage. It's not about me, the person. And before coming and to sit on this so-called throne, called a throne, and sitting on a throne, this tradition of sitting on a throne, after Buddha passed away, various disciples got together and they shared among them the various teachings that Buddha had conferred to them. And they said, okay, Buddha, in this context, he told me this. In that context, he told me this. And so they shared it among them. And they took a yellow part of their robes and they folded them up and they made a kind of seat you know. And then so each one sat in that seat to share what Buddha had taught them. So there's this act of respect towards who teaches, but it's more the respect towards what is taught, um, um, and not towards the person himself. And then, of course, there's also respect for who teaches. But first and foremost is for the teachings. And on my side, it's my job to remember, or to remind myself of impermanence. When I snap my fingers, this is when I snap my fingers, it's a sign of impermanence, that time is passing, it's coming, going by. And this is to remind myself that I am going to die, because one of the most dangerous traps for he who has this responsibility of sharing, teaching, that trap would be the attachment to image, attachment to a kind of power, to guide, to spiritual power, we can call, I mean, on a mundane level, but one could have a lot of attachment to that. So it's to remind oneself to is to remind myself that I'm here to be at the service of you, and sooner or later you're going to die. So it's to remember that. And then we recited some prayers. Even prayer is not the best translation, because the word prayer in English too sounds as if we're asking for something. I mean, we do have prayers in Buddhism where we ask for something, but most verses that are recited have nothing to do with asking for something. These are verses to induce oneself into a state of into a certain state of consciousness. So they're aspirational prayers. That first part we all recited, and we connect with our own masters. I remember my master, the master of my master, with a feeling of gratitude. Also to express, I'm not here to share anything that I've invented, but I'm here to share what I've received from my masters. So here we recite prayers asking for the blessings of my master Lama Michel Rinpoche, then his master, all the way to Buddha Shakyamuni. This is to remember that within Tibetan Buddhism, there's a very, very important concept. It's something physical somehow. It's that we call this an uninterrupted lineage. So if I'm here to transmit something, it's because I received it from my master, who received it from his, etc., until we get to the source of Buddha Shakyamuni. So this line, this uninterrupted line, is extremely important for us. So that's why we remember that. Then we make a mandala offering, which is a request. Why? Because since the time of Buddha never taught without having been asked. Wherever he would go, he never taught if someone didn't ask. If we see all the sutras of Buddha's, these transcriptions of his teachings, because he never wrote anything himself. After he died, his disciples united and they started saying, okay, in this occasion I was in this place, and this person asked this question to Buddha, and this is his answer. His answer is this, that, and the other. So for about 300 years, it's said that all the teachings of Buddha stayed only orally, because because people were able to memorize much better at that time. I mean, and just just look at us. I mean, just a few years ago, we were able to remember many, many phone numbers, and now we don't. I mean, our memory works if it's used. We have this we have this false memory, thinking that when I, you know, we think, okay, when I need that information, it's accessible to me, and I don't need to keep it inside of me. That generates other problems, but that's not the time to talk about it. The point is, if the further we go back in past, the greater people's ability to memorize was. And once books were printed, I mean, the books existed and things were, and texts were printed, then people memorized less. In Tibet, books were very, very difficult to find, and so that's why everything was memorized. Even today, in the Tibetan tradition, memorization is fundamental. There was a boy in my class, for example. He entered the monastery at the age of 2, and since he was a very, very small child, he received this formal education. He was a very important Lama. He, every year, in the memorization exam, he would give 1,500 pages, actually 3,000, because it's 1,500 pages, so front and back, so that he memorized word for word. So just imagine, as the years go on, he just would accumulate so much knowledge. All the meditational sadhanas, all the prayers, all the sutras. He remembered everything, and this comes from training, and it's said that this was even greater in the past. So for about 300 years, the Buddha's disciples, they would hand down the teachings orally, and they were sure that it wasn't changed, because those who told these sutras, they were always recited in the same way. And they were sure about this. At a certain point, they started to see that there were variations in the versions. And when this happened, they came together and they wrote them all down, which is about 300 years after the death of Buddha. In all of Buddha's sutras, they start, in Tibetan, they start with one day I heard. So one day I heard, I found myself in this place, and Buddha was present with these disciples, and so they said who was there at that time, and it would say this person, specific person, asked this question to Buddha, and Buddha answered like this. And almost all the sutras start from a question. So there's also a commitment within the Tibetan tradition that goes back to the time of Buddha, which is that one should never teach something if he's not asked. And at the same time, once one is asked, one must teach. 8. And here arises, every time that there is a teaching of Dharma, at the beginning there's a request. So that's why when we do this mandala offering of Sashi Puki, this is to remember this, So nobody wants to convert anyone, to Buddhism. There was someone has asked a question, or and here in our context, it works really well, because I don't think anyone is here. It has been forced to come here today. You're here from your own spontaneous, for your own desire to be here. So you are curious and you want to learn. And in this context, I recite it because most of you don't know, but when you go to a monastery, at this moment, he who he who teaches doesn't say anything, and that verse of request comes from the part of the disciples or those who are listening. And then there's the verse in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge into enlightenment with the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. And this is called the generation of the motivation. It's when one remembers why we're here. Why we're here. It's when we generate one's own motivation. And I'm not going into details right now, otherwise we'll talk only about this. But here is where we look again at our motivation. And for the last part, I recite, I put my hand in this gesture. It's the mudra of transmitting the Dharma. And I said, Blayi. There are different formulas of different ways to recite it at the beginning of a teaching. And it cannot be, that's just a part, it can be much longer. But here, mostly, I'm reminding myself what I'm about to do. And mostly, in this case, here I imagine that I can transmit the teachings according to the language and the needs of everyone who's listening. So I remind myself that I need to adapt myself to those who are listening. It says, in the language of every being, I'm going to share the Dharma. And here when we say the language, it's not just Tibetan, English, or Italian. It refers to the mentality of everyone who's listening. So here I should adapt myself to the mentality of who's listening. This is just to give an idea of what we did here at the beginning. Good. Something that's important is that these formalities, they're not really formalities. They're tools to help us generate inner states of being. They're not, and they're not at all an obligation. It's not that someone comes in that they must do prostrations or recite this, that, and the other. These are tools that help us connect with our motivation, with an attitude of humility, humbleness, and what's necessary for our path. But there's never an obligation to do any of this. In no moment is it an obligation. We don't have, at least I certainly don't, and as a center much less. But for me, not at all. I don't have the objective that I don't want everyone who comes here to become Buddhist. I can't say it's just the objective is not to become Buddhist. Being or not being Buddhist, what does that mean? And it is all part of a tool. The objective is to be people, to have more patience, more wisdom, have more inner stability, have less anger, have less anxiety, live more harmoniously with ourselves and others. This is our objective. And being Buddhist or not, has to do more with the objective for this path. Now, let's get to the main point. Just a minute. Each one of us is made up of many aspects, many attributes. And I've talked about this many times, but let's pick it up. Each one of us, we have many characteristics that form our being. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we talk about 5 main attributes. One that we have is genetic. Rikyu in Tibetan, Rikigyuten, translated in modern terminology, we could say genetics, but in we can say that we have attributes of our body and our mind that have been handed down from our parents, our grandparents, our great parents. In other words, the experiences, the choices, traumas, positive or negative, everything that our parents lived, what our grandparents, great parents lived. So a part of that is handed down also to us. So we have a part of ourselves that is strongly influenced by this. And using modern terms, we could say that these are genetic attributes, characteristics. There are studies, for example, that show us that even that there are some kinds of fears that are genetically handed down in human beings and in animals too. It's even more clear with animals. There are many instincts that are handed down that are not taught. I've seen this. I haven't had in my life the opportunity to be close to many animals, but about a year ago, my little puppy, I saw that she had many attitudes that I had never taught her or that she had never learned. But she knew how to do, and she knows how to do many, many things just by instinct. I mean, that comes from her birth. No one needed to show her. And we have the same. It's called also, every once in a while, this is the memory of our ancestors, an ancestral memory, that comes from the experiences and the habits of those who have come before us. So there's a part that influences us. There's a part of ourselves that's made up of what we call the innate characteristics, the aspects of our character that come from birth, and it's what we take from life to life. In other words, when we see two children, even twins, or not necessarily, not even, they don't have to be twins, but if we see two brothers, for example, even if they were born in the same family, etc., etc., since being very small, we see that they each have their own character, their own personality, and there's a part of this, simplifying too much, we'd say that there's a part of our personality that we take from life to life. If in this life I strongly familiarize myself with helping others, so I'm strongly used to helping others. When I'm reborn, I will have a predisposition for helping others. If I'm used to lying, when I'm in my next life, I will easily lie. If I'm a violent person, I will be reborn with a predisposition to be violent. If I'm patient and then I'll be reborn with this characteristic of patience. The third attribute is our cultural context where we grow up. The information that we receive from birth to today, we've constantly received information, on a formal level, like studies. We go to school where we learn concepts. Our parents explain things to us, but also from an indirect point of view, the things that we see, that we hear about, and we're constantly receiving information since birth. I mean, just look how a child imitates his own parents. So we receive so much information that make up a part of our being. And the fourth characteristic, Jangto Gyunten, and then the fourth one is Nyonto Gyunten. And these are characteristics that come from our experiences. I do something, I feel good. I want to repeat it. I have attraction towards something. I do something and I feel bad and I generate aversion to that thing. So there are characteristics, for example, you know, often we have experiences that are not consistent with our understanding of things. Like I I have one experience, but I learned something different. Just to say that what we learn, what we experience with our senses, directly, our feelings tell us differently. So technically, for example, I should trust you. I should trust you, but my experiences lead me to not. And so a lot of our personality is founded from our experiences. So we have this genetic component, we have our innate characteristics, we have what we've learned, from education and our social cultural context, and then all of our experiences. The fifth characteristics that I add is our actual body, because there's a genetic component to our body, but there's also a very strong component that comes from how we've taken care of our body up till now. So it might seem strange, but our mood, our thoughts are really influenced by what we eat. They're influenced by how we sleep, by our lifestyle. Just an example. For example, when we're born with a certain amount of serotonin, and is generated as we're children. We have this reserve of serotonin. Every time that we feel some kind of sensory pleasure, we use up a part of that serotonin reserve. And there's certain attitudes in our life, that provoke the production of more serotonin. So, but our modern lifestyle, compared to our grandparents, when you look at the level of sensory stimuli, who has more, compared to our grandparents? We do. I mean, the way we eat today, every day is Christmas. I mean, Christmas comes and there's nothing special to cook. It seems almost like a burden to have a Christmas dinner or lunch, because every day we already eat what we like. I mean, we don't have that habit anymore, just to, eat to eat something just basic and then have a very special meal. Another birthday cake, more sweets. Every time we come into contact with a sensory pleasure, we use up serotonin. What's the other aspect? To produce serotonin that is produced during the day, its quantity depends on a precursor, which is melatonin. So it's said that you can't generate serotonin during the day if you haven't produced melatonin at night. And the quantity of serotonin that we can produce during the day is based on how much melatonin we have produced. And melatonin is produced only during deep sleep. So, and it's said that even the small red light of the TV that's off, that inhibits the production of melatonin. So in our modern lifestyle, often we don't sleep well. We we don't get up early until very late at night. In Until very late at night, we are taken by external stimuli, and melatonin isn't produced immediately. It starts even before we sleep, and then we have we use up a lot of serotonin, and we don't produce it easily anymore. So more and more, earlier and earlier, there are people who are in a chemical, like younger and younger, they're entering into a kind of chemical depression because the reserve of serotonin has been used up. So even if there are sensory stimuli, one can't have that satisfaction or feel that pleasure because they don't have that hormone anymore. That hormone is lacking. So in that fifth characteristic, there's the body, how we live our life, because if there's something in the body that is not healthy, that falls onto to the mind. The mind and body are absolutely linked. So that's why healthy lifestyle benefits also the mind. Just to close this parenthesis, most problems that we have to face today come from this modern lifestyle because there are different characteristics of this modern lifestyle that are just unhealthy, that generate anxiety and fear and depression, etc. It's true that every day it's Christmas on some level, so we should be happier. Instead, there's a level of dissatisfaction, there's a level of anxiety, of fear, of emotional instability, you know. You know, you know, instead, if you look at, our grandparents, those who even lived through the Second World War, they should be absolutely traumatized, and yet they are much more satisfied, and they seem emotionally more stable, compared to today, don't they? I think so. And we should ask ourselves why, It's because they didn't have any traumas? No, I don't think so. My grandparents on my father's side, they escaped, you know, they they escaped the Second World War. Being Jewish, they escaped Europe. They saw all of those close to them, around them, killed. You know, and you know, and I talked to my grandfather, and they had problems of robbers coming into the house, and with a gun to grandmother's head. He said, yeah, well, we're facing it. There, there's more stability, there's more harmony, there's more satisfaction. Instead, we live in a time where you know we have a level of material well-being that's very high, and also that physically we're able to take care of ourselves much better, but emotionally we're very unbalanced. There's something in our modern lifestyle that is something that's just not going right. So we're influenced by our genetics, by our habits, the deep habits from previous lives, from what we've learned in our social, cultural context, our education, are the experiences we've lived, and also our body. So we're influenced by hormones, influenced by different aspects of our body. There are studies that show, for example, that the emotional state is strongly influenced by our by the microorganisms in our gut. Um, there's a there's a study where they took these small mice in the lab, and they're genetically identical, and they saw that over time, some were more calm and some were more nervous, as a personality, let's say. And what they did was they they took the they took the intestinal flora of the nervous mice, and they put it into the intestines of the calm mice. And then the calm mice became nervous. And then they did the the and then they did the opposite, and they had the same effect. So the nervous mice became calm. And when I read this, I thought, this is incredible. Instead of spending hours meditating, maybe we can find a quicker path. Anyway, so the intestinal flora inside of us in, have an influence, even on they have an influence over our mood, over our mind, our personality. I mean, look, we have hormonal cycles, right? Men do too. Even if there's not a clear physical manifestation like there is with women, but men have their cycle too. I know some men, it's very clear when they're having their cycle, and emotionally it has its effects, of course. That's why, so we have these characteristics. And the point that I want to get to is that we're not totally free. We're not free to be who we want to be totally. We're strongly conditioned by genetics, the conditionings from previous lives, our education, our experiences, our body, and the body also includes our environment. The air we breathe, the water we drink, our physical surroundings, the people around us, or also astrological aspects. This all influences us. Just think about the moon. Does the moon influence water or not? Just anyone who understands even just a little bit about gardening, before cutting a plant here or before planting something, one looks at the moon. Why? Because the moon has an influence on water. And do we have any water in our bodies? Of course. So it has an influence over the body, over our bodies, over our moods, over our minds. So we're strongly influenced by all this. And when I say we have not much freedom, I mean to say that we can't, from one moment to the next, no longer be influenced by all these aspects. Inevitably, we are influenced by all of this. But there's a fundamental point here, that within all of this, we're not just living beings. We are we're sentient beings. There's a difference here. We're both living beings and sentient beings. A non-sentient being is like a rock, for example. Is a rock a living being or not? Yes. It's living. It has a birth, has a life, has a death. It interacts with everything around it, has very clear rules of interaction. If you act in one way, the rock will react in that way. And plants as well, of course. According to Buddhist teachings, plants are living beings, but not sentient beings. That means here, if you have a plant and you know a little bit about the rules of interacting with a plant, you know that that plant needs a certain amount of light, a certain temperature. You know, the water, it's better to water like this and the fertilizer like this. If you act in a certain way with that plant, you will always get the same results. And when you act always in the same way with a person, do you always get the same results? No. That's why so many people prefer to be with plants. Imagine that the plant started to say, oh no, but today I don't like how you're dressed. So I don't really feel like flowering because I was upset that yesterday you came home a little bit late. And I think you could have brought me a little bit more water, but you didn't. And instead, you know, as you brought me the water, you were talking to someone else. And other days you were giving me more attention. Once you were kinder with me, and now you're not. I mean, just think of the plants, you know, think all these things like we do. So the difference between a sentient being and a living being is here. I mean, living beings have interactions. They have a birth, a life, and a death, but they don't have this emotional aspect. They don't have this part of cognition. They don't have judgment. They have their own energy. They have a life process, and they interact with reality. But it's not an interaction that comes through a cognitive process. A sentient being is a being who has a cognitive process. There's a part of the mind that perceives and that judges, that has his own discernment, says this is like this is like that, and in front of that has his own perception of reality and interacts accordingly. This takes us to the point that we're able to discern, and we're able to choose based on what's in front of us. We're not totally free in our choice because we're not free from those characteristics that we talked about before. But within these conditionings that we live in, we have do we have a little bit of freedom of choice or not? For example, I'm in front of a situation. Can I choose go or not go? I'll go or I won't go, or I'm going to say something or I'm going to be quiet. You know, sometimes it's hard, but can we choose? Okay, I'm going to show this emotion or that one. Can we choose, you know, to do something, or we choose to not do something and do something else? I mean, you know, we wake up in the morning, we can choose. Okay, I'm going to look at my phone, or I'm going to focus on my breath. We can choose, can't we? So this ability to choose that we have is what allows us to transform our genetics, our conditionings, our knowledge, our experiences, and our body, and our surroundings in a with awareness. We can do this transformation with awareness because scientifically it's called epigenetics, that our DNA is in constant transformation. Otherwise, we'd be identical to our ancestors. Instead, it's constantly transforming according to our lifestyle and experiences that we live. The imprints that we have, you know, they transform depending on the experiences we have, our knowledge, of course, experiences, and our body as well. So we are constantly in transformation. And this is one of the first principles of Buddhism. All composed phenomenon are composed phenomenon are impermanent. Impermanent means that's in constant transformation. A being in constant transformation means that he interacts. Why do things change? because they interact, and the transformation comes through through interaction. The the way one interacts leads to one transformation or another. So in every moment of our lives, where can we exercise this freedom of choice? In our actions, and so interactions with others, in our speech, and in our thoughts. And here, here we have this first division, the first fundamental point. We can live our lives as if we were a result of the world around us, our surroundings, where I don't exercise my free will, but I exercise my freedom of choice as if it were a result of everything around me. I do this because you did that. I react like this because that thing happened. So continuously we are reacting to the world around us, and we live as if we're the victim. Is that clear? So when, why'd you say this? Oh, because he said this. Why'd you make this choice? Because that happened. So we live this present moment as a reaction to the past. Another possibility is where we need to live this present moment as a cause of the future. So why do I act like this? Not because this or that happened, because I want this thing to happen. Why do you talk like this? Because I want that to happen. Why do you think like this? Because I want to familiarize myself with this aspect instead of that. So, in every moment, our thoughts, our words, our actions, they shape and transform our being. And in this process, we have freedom of choice. Because we're impermanent and because we're sentient beings. We do not lack discernment. We don't lack judgment. We don't lack choice. We have this ability. It's not total, because obviously we're conditioned by everything we talked about before. We're conditioned by what we see on the news, what we read in the newspapers, or what we receive by messenger. Every information we receive in every moment. But within all of that, we still have a freedom of choice. And this is one of the first fundamental aspects. And here, Buddha, in his vision, he has us make a choice. There's a verse that says, it translated, it means, I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. It's true that I'm influenced by the genetics and everything else, but among all the influences that I have, the strongest are my own thoughts, my own choices. Do I want or not? Do I want to take the reins of my hand, the reins of my life in my hand, or do I want to keep living as a victim of the world? By the world, I mean a victim of the various situations, my family, work, etc. Because normally, when we feel an emotion, or when we're fearful or sad or anxious or have a negative feeling, emotion, don't we point our finger at someone and we victimize ourselves, don't we? If the world wasn't so bad, I'd be fine. if my children didn't act like this, if my parents, if my husband didn't act like this, I'd be fine. To see if this is true at a certain point of view, you know, just stay alone for a little while and see how you feel. If being totally alone, you see that you don't feel good, then you're not in good company. Then there's something to change. And someone who's really well with himself can be fine alone or in with others. But this first point is impermanence. Impermanence is something that's absolutely marvelous. And often when we talk about impermanence, we have this ideal of something being heavy. We think about impermanence, we think about death. There's this idea, there's something that it's negative, it's something heavy. No, it's impermanent. Okay, everything that starts sooner or later ends. Yeah, what is born sooner or later will die. So what gathers will then at some point separate. But the nature of everything that we interact with is that sooner or later, it will end. What gathers will separate. What is born will die. But here there's a fundamental point. What does that mean to finish? What does death mean? It means transformation. Because if I see this bottle, at a certain point, this bottle was born. When was it? When was it was created? When the glass was made into this form, then the name bottle was attributed to the object. When is it going to die? If I break it, it shatters into thousands of pieces, and we can say that the bottle doesn't exist anymore. That it has died. But what about the glass that formed the bottle and the water that was inside? So the death of the bottle is simply the moment where such a transformation of the object occurs that it can no longer sustain that name. It's not the end of everything. When we say death or when we say birth, they're concepts. The birth of something is when we attribute a name to a whole of parts. And to that whole of parts, we give a new identity to it. We attribute a name. When that whole of parts can no longer sustain that name, we say that that object has died, that it's finished. But those parts continue to interact, and they go on. So birth, the birth is the moment of the sperm and the ovum come together, and that grows to actual birth. And then if this body can no longer support itself, then that consciousness is no longer sustained in that body, and we call that death. But the body continues. It transforms into something else. Our consciousness continues and lives in a different way. But that person with that name, that concept is no longer. But I hope it's clear that if birth, like death, these are concepts. There's a verse that says this: nothing begins, nothing ends. It's just all in transformation. When we say that it has begun or has ended, has been created, it has died, we're just giving a new identity to something. That's the beginning. When that identity can no longer be sustained, and we say that it's ended, but it's simply it has transformed, and it transforms in every instant. So everything that we perceive is in constant transformation. We ourselves, we are in constant transformation. Every aspect of our being, of our society, of our family, of our body, of our surroundings, everything is in constant transformation. This means that it's impermanent. But there's something strange. When we look at each other, we see each other today, okay, we have a clear image of the person, and then let's say in 2 days we meet up again. Who do we think we're going to meet? I mean, the same person that we left or someone completely different? We expect to see the same person. Just if I ask you, you know, since we started, since we started talking today here, has my beard grown? Without philosophizing, your direct perception. No. But if we stop and analyze, has the person after 2 years, has that person changed or not? Inevitably, yes. Unless that person, does it happen that just one day, boom, somebody changes, or actually a beard, for example, it says that normally, on the average, the 5 millimeters in a second. So a millimeter, a nanometer. So 5 of those. So it's 1 millimeter divided by a billion, and then 5 of those. That's how fast the beard grows per second. Obviously, our refresh rate, where we're able to perceive something, it doesn't follow that. So our vision, our vision, we're not able to perceive something so small. So, for example, if we're watching a film, let's say there are 30 frames, so we're watching TV, and if you put it just on one frame, it's too fast, and our brain is not able to perceive something so quickly. But that message still arrives to our mind. What I mean to say is that we don't see that my beard is growing because it grows so slowly that our eyes and our mind are not able to perceive it. So when we see someone, we say, okay, the beard hasn't grown. But if we analyze, does the beard grow from one moment to the next, or is it a slow process? If we see each other in a week, someone will say, "Oh, your beard has really grown," or if I shaved every morning, like my father does, at the end of the day, one would say, "Oh, your beard has grown." All of this to say that even if my beard is in constant transformation, or people's hair, when we see, they appear permanent. How does it appear to us? Something in constant transformation or something static? It appears to us as being permanent, static. When we see someone else, even when we see ourselves, actually, who do we think we're seeing, or we'll see the next time? The same, even if that person is in constant transformation. When is it that we're able to perceive a transformation? When that transformation has come in such a way where that the image that we have of that person can no longer be sustained by its parts. So here, one of our ignorances is manifested. Ignorance understood as not seeing. We see a reality that's impermanent. Every phenomenon that we see is impermanent, but they appear permanent, and we relate to them as if they were permanent. And so we get upset when things change. We have this expectation that things should always be the same. A classic thing I've heard many, many times, or at least is when there's something beautiful, oh, I hope it stays like this forever, or something, or if it's something bad, oh, I can't live like this forever. When someone's upset or when someone's upset, they say, oh, I can't live like this forever. I say, don't worry. Like this is it's not going to go on forever. It's in constant transformation. It's going to get better. It's going to get worse. But like this, it's not going to stay. When something transforms, just think in this present moment. How many variables are present in here and now? How many things had to happen in this complex, this complex interaction? I mean, just think about everyone's life. How many things had to come about for to bring about this present moment? Is it a incredibly complex net of choices and happenings that have generated this present moment? And the craziest thing is that you just one thing needs to be different for this moment to not be as it is. On my side, I can tell you so many stories, some even quite nice, where just, maybe just one of those things needed to be different for me to not be here today. And on your side, it's the same. Lama Ganchen. If Lama Ganchen hadn't gone to Brazil, probably I wouldn't be here today. Because Lama Ganchen came to Brazil, Claudio and Monica, Monica, who's often here in the shop at the center, she and her ex-husband Claudio, they met Rinpoche in India or Italy, I don't remember. But in India, one of the things he did was in Goa. We're talking about the 1980s, and in the 80s in Goa, there was a kind of hippie market. It was a market where there was just everything, and Lama Ganchen made a stand in this hippie market, and he put kind of like a red cross, and he wrote Lama Healer, and so he was in this hippie market doing healing practices. And many people, that then became very important in this interaction, in this present moment. They met him there. People who went to India for their own spiritual research, their own their spiritual quests or pleasures, the quest for pleasures. And Rinpoche would say, Lama Ganchen would say, from hippie to happy. And I mean, he went also to see, he wanted to see the reality. He went to see what raves were. It was as if he was there trying to connect with these people. And Claudio and Monica, they came back to Brazil and they wanted at all costs to invite Lama Ganchen to Brazil, but they didn't have the means to do that. So they spoke to a friend of theirs, Professor Charette, who's an astrologer, and my mother had been to him. He had done her astrological map, and then he said to her, you know, here there's an important meeting, here's a potential. And then when he met Claudio and Monica, who wanted to bring this Lama healer to Brazil, he said, I know the right person. And he went to her 30th birthday party, and he said, I want to introduce you to these couple of two friends. They want to invite the Lama healer to Brazil. He showed a photo of Lama Ganchen to her. You know, she didn't, she didn't even know what, where. She didn't have a particular idea of where Tibet was, what it was. She had been to Hong Kong, had done 6 months of Tai Chi, but she didn't have any kind of any clear idea about it, to Tibetan Buddhism. But then she said yes, and this was the first important condition for him to come. And the people for Rinpoche, they were saying, well, why are you going to Brazil? Why are you going to Brazil? So what I mean to say with all this, I mean, if my mother had not had a party that day, or if she had looked at the photo, maybe she would have been, after looking at the photo, she said, okay, nice, bring him, but then maybe she wouldn't have gone to see him. Or what if she hadn't done her astrological map with this mutual friend of Claudia and Monica's? I mean, if any one of those things had not happened, then I very probably would not be here today. But, I mean, I can tell you an infinite number of interactions, of thoughts, of experiences, like Lama Ganchen left Tibet in 1963. If he hadn't left Tibet, at a certain point needed to go to the north of India because he was full of debts, because he was the kind of a Robin Hood where he didn't steal, but he borrowed money. That Tibetan community was very, very poor. They hardly covered. They were often without enough food to eat or take care of themselves. So often he would borrow money for those who had better means, and then he would give the money to those who need. But he had an enormous amount of debts. And at a certain point, instead of going on retreat, he went, that's a long story, he went to the north of India, where he had been invited by the royal family of Sikkim, because the Queen Mother, she had a sickness with her eyes, and he was invited to cure her. And so instead of 3 months, he ended up staying there for 3 years. He cured her, became very, very well known. And then at the time, he was invited to go to Nepal, to the family of Tsetin Gyurme, who was here just a few weeks ago. And his family they organized a long life puja for Lama Ganchen in Nepal. They were quite poor at the time too. They didn't have a place that was big enough, for this big puja. So what they used was the big carpet factory, and during the puja in the showroom, a client of Seton comes and Seton says, today I can't show you carpets because today we have a puja. We have a puja for our Lama, and this man, his name was Yurgu. He asked if he could stay, come in and participate, and he was just he couldn't even explain why, but he started crying when he saw Rinpoche. He was really, really touched. He went to him and he invited him to come to Greece. And the Rinpoche said no. He said, there's so many lamas in the West. There's so many people who need me here. But after insisting a lot, he said, okay, I'll come on one condition, that there are sick people, the sick people, and that the doctors there are not able to cure. And after just a few months later, Rinpoche was in Greece. And then before that, he went to Tsetin Gyurme, and he said to him, look, listen, I'd like a passport. Let's remember, he was a refugee, so he didn't have a homeland. Tsetin Gyurme, through his connections, he was able to give him a passport as being part of his family. And in that way, Lama Ganchen said, thank you. Now I want a visa for every country in the world. And Seton said, okay, maybe a couple countries that you want to know, but all the countries of the world, every visa is really expensive. And Nampa said, I want to go everywhere. In the end, Seton, he made all the countries in Europe, a few other countries, and he brought them to, without giving it to Rinpoche, without understanding why. And then Yurgo invited him to Greece just a short time after having the passport with the visas. Yurgo invited him to Greece. But I asked myself, if Yurgo hadn't gone to the carpet showroom that day, or if Rinpoche had gone on retreat in India, or if that meeting hadn't come about, or if he had been invited to go to Taiwan or somewhere else in Asia and had made his life somewhere else, we just don't know. If Juzi, who was the girl who then invited Rinpoche to Italy, if let's remember also Juzi, who is this girl from Bologna who had a terrible tumor already. It was metastasized in her liver, and the doctors had given her 2 or 3 months to live. She was absolutely desperate. She looked for doctors everywhere. She wasn't able to find anything. She went to Geshe Jampo Gyatso, the Institute of Lama Tsongkhapa Center in Pomaya, a marvelous Lama. Here we're talking about 1986, 1987. She went there, and when she asked him, okay, I have this sickness, Geshe Jampo Gyatso said, I can't help you too much, but there is a healing Lama, and he's in Greece right now. His name is Lama Ganchen. Why don't you go find him? And so Juzi went to Greece. She found Lama Ganchen, and she gave her the white and red the water and cream pills, did some healing mantras, just a few things. Then she was there for a week. When she arrived, she could hardly walk, and at the end she was dancing, and she came home feeling really good. And then she invited Rinpoche to Italy. And he stayed at her house for 1 year in Bologna. And then he told her that she needed to go to Nepal to live. And every time she was in Nepal, she felt good. but when she'd come back to Italy, her symptoms would come back. So she moved to Nepal. She opened up a business for healing herbs in Nepal. She had her family there, but thanks to her that Lama Gangchen came to Italy. Otherwise, maybe he would have stayed in Greece. We don't know. What I mean to say is, sorry, I wasn't able to not tell a little bit of our story and talk about the people who have allowed us to be here. So these are little interactions, small choices, and if they hadn't happened like that, then our present would be different. This is clear. Do we see the power in every action, in every choice? From our ignorance, we're not able to see, what this interaction, what it will bring, and what I'm living today. What are the various things that created this moment? But if we analyze a little and we observe, we see that every small interaction, interacting among themselves, they bring about this moment, and this shows me clearly the power of every word, of every choice, of every encounter, of every moment, of every thought. Nothing just happens in vain. In impermanence, we recognize the power of every moment, every interaction, every thought. And as a consequence, we try to interact with the world with awareness. This is our starting point. When we talk about the 4 pillars of Buddhism, this seal or pillar, the first is impermanence. It's something absolutely marvelous, because impermanence is what allows us to change, because within the impermanence we have this free will. I mean, we are not without freedom. And even if the causes and our conditions are innumerable, each one is determining. And in this present moment, we're constructing our future. Is that clear? This is the first important point. So when we talk about impermanence, it manifests itself in the law of karma. I'm sure you've heard about the law of karma. It has nothing to do with destiny. Karma literally means action. So, okay, this is my karma. What does that mean? In this present moment, what I live is the result of the interaction of my past actions. What I do today is going to interact, and what I'm going to live in the future. To understand the concept of karma better, we need to understand that there's karma and there's what's called karmic force. It's this act. It's like the action and the kind of inertia of that action. If I take this object and I throw it, the action ends once I've opened my hand. But the object keeps on going, because there's a kind of strength, there's a kind of inertia of movement. Imagine that I throw this object, but imagine there's no obstruction, because now I throw it, it's going to interact. Once I let go of it, it interacts with the force of gravity, the Earth's the gravity and the atmosphere, and then at a certain point it's going to fall. But if I throw this outside the Earth's atmosphere, it's going to go on, more or less, like forever, like a satellite. I've never tried, but following the theory of what I've been told, I imagine it's like this. With karma, what happens is we do something, an action, we do something, it's physical or verbal or mental, a thought, an emotion. This action generates a strength, a kind of force, inertia, karmic force that stays with us. To understand this, just look at us today. Are we living? Are we still living experiences from past memories or experiences of our childhood, etc.? Is this moment totally indifferent from our past? No, it's a result of our choices. But the actions are finished. But these actions generate a kind of inertia that interact with other things and bring a result. And this is called karmic force. So when we talk about karma, we're talking about action, we're talking about interaction, so that force that's generated from that action at a certain point comes into contact with something else and generates its result. And the results are our experiences, our feelings, our sensations in this present moment. So everything that we live in this present moment is the result of our choices, our actions that we've done in the past that interact with the so-called conditions of the present moment. The conditions are of two types. They're conditions of ourselves and conditions of others, internal or external. My actions, my thoughts, my body, these are internal actions. My present state of mind and body, these interact with the causes of the past, and I also interact with those who surround me. So I'm not indifferent to what everyone around me does. My physical and mental state, and the physical and mental state and the actions of those around me, they interact also with the actions that I have also created in the past. And this union between inner and external condition that meet the karmic force of the actions of the past bring about the present moment. This all this all has to do with impermanence, This is really important starting point because it shows us why it's possible to transform, because we're impermanent and we have free will. The second point, the second foundation for the Buddhist thought is said everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. Sakshe tapche dunalwa. When we suffer, which can happen every once in a while, do we have something or someone that we want to blame? Normally, when we suffer, what do? Oh, I'm just suffering. I just don't feel well. I'm upset. Or I'm upset because I find myself in a situation where my conditionings are of the past are manifesting, and given that I generated these negative conditionings of me in the past, and now they're meeting certain conditions and bringing that out, or are we just suffering and that's it? And we normally point the finger. I mean, do we point that finger inside, outside, and nowhere? Well, here, my first question: do we point the finger? Yes. Where? Towards ourselves or outside ourselves? Outside ourselves. A classic example is the person who's very, very proud of being Buddhist, and then you ask this very proud Buddhist, why do you suffer? Oh, I suffer because of my mental defilements, like my ignorance, my selfishness, and all the derivatives of jealousy and anger, and then my karma, the actions done, based on these, and from that comes the negative result. This is my karma, but then something happens. It's your fault, So, and all the rest was just a concept that just ended up on a shelf. I'm not asking where you're pointing your finger, philosophically speaking. No, in your daily life, where are you pointing the finger? Our tendency is to point the finger towards the reality around us. Classic example is that we think that we suffer because we think that reality is not the way it should be. We're incredibly attached to how we think reality should be, how people should be, etc. And when that reality doesn't correspond to our own idealized version of how it should be, then we are just upset. Seen like this, we're quite ignorant. This is how we project our cause of ignorance. Normally, we project that into three things. One, we suffer. We suffer because we don't have their objects of desire. We suffer because we can't have what we want. I mean, just look back. Have you ever suffered because you couldn't get what you wanted? Materially speaking, physically, in a relationship with other people. I wish you were like this. I'd like to have your attention and I don't have them. I'd like to have time to do this and I don't have it. I'd like to have this, that, or the other, and I just don't. Have you ever suffered for something like this? I think so. The second thing, we think we suffer because we have to live situations that we don't like. We have to come into contact with objects of aversion. I need to be with this person that I don't like. I need to do this thing that I don't like. You have to do this, that, and the other that I just don't want to do. So we need to live situations, meet people and objects, etc., that we just don't want. And the third main reason that we think we suffer is that we have to separate from what we like. So one, because we can't get what we want, we have to enter into contact with what we don't like, and we have to be separated from what we do like, what we have. And if you see, among all various sufferings, more or less, most of them can be summarized. They fall into these three categories. And consequently, in our lifetime, what are we trying to do? We try to get our objects of desire, avoid our objects of aversion, and keep our objects of attachment. Is that clear? It can seem a little poor, but I mean, we can summarize our life in these 3 points. Very often, I mean, most of our life can be summarized in trying to get our objects of desire, trying to avoid objects of aversion, and holding on objects of attachment. Is that clear? Now, in front of all this, we think, not in a conceptual way, what I call a materialistic utopia. We think that we will really be happy the day that reality will be the way we think it should be. The day the people will be kind to us, the day I'll have all my objects of desire and pleasure, the day that the reality around me should be the way I think it should be. We have this kind of illusion that it's possible to be happy through changing our external reality, and they lived happily ever after. So we do have this dream, this idealization. The second seal, which is everything that all impure phenomena are the nature of suffering, shows us that, I mean, just each one of us, we experience everything, every object, every person, everything, inevitably through the filter of ourselves. Is that clear? When I go to see someone, I see you through the filter of my genetics, my imprints, my karma, my previous experiences, what I've learned in the culture in which I was raised, the filter of myself, my body, my senses. And together with that, we can add up the filter of attachment and anger and jealousy, etc. So are we able to live anything independently of these filters? No. Did it ever happen that you saw something in one way at a certain time in your life, and then another time in your life see it differently, like watching a movie twice and seeing it completely differently? I mean, what changed? Just your filters changed. For example, it happened to me that I saw films, I watched movies, and I thought they were absolutely marvelous. And then I go back and I watch the movie, and that doesn't impress me at all. Like, didn't have fun. It wasn't. But it didn't have the same impact because I was living a different time of my life, and it's like this for everything. So as long as our filters are different, we will always perceive reality as if it were dirty. Everything that's impure, everything that's polluted from our ignorance, from our self-cherishing, from our fears, our anxiety, our attachment, our anger, our arrogance, our miserliness, etc. Everything that is polluted by these so-called mental defilements of ours becomes of the nature of suffering. Doesn't matter where I go, doesn't matter with whom I am or what situation I find myself in. I will always, as long as I live these experiences with dirty filters, reality will be impure. So Buddha here transmitted, he said that we're not the victim of the world. We need to stop victimizing ourselves. Don't project our happiness on the world around us. It just doesn't work. It's not true that we suffer because we can't get what we don't, we can't get what we want. Even if it seems like that, what we said before, we suffer because we think we suffer because we can't get what we want, and we have to live what we don't want, and we have to be separated from what we love. It seems like that, but it's not. Because first of all, the more I have, the more I want. It never ends. It's not that I can get happy just getting my objects of desire, because it's never ending. And it's not true that I suffer because I can't have my object of desire. I suffer because I desire what I can't have. It's not just a play on words. We think that we suffer because we can't get what we want. And so I'm a victim of the world. I can't get what I'd like, and so as a consequence I suffer. And to not suffer, I need to get what I want. So it depends on the rest of the world, depends on something outside of me. Instead, in reality, from my point of view, from what I've learned and seen, we suffer because we desire, we want something that the causes and conditions don't permit. I would like to get pregnant. I think it would be really a wonderful experience. I deeply want to get pregnant. What can I do? If I'm here suffering day and night because I can't get pregnant, it's not just the man can't get pregnant. Why was I born a man? You know, I really want to be pregnant. It's not right. And I'm here suffering because I can't get pregnant. And someone would say, you're suffering for nothing. I mean, why are you being crazy? You're never going to be able to be pregnant. Suffering for something, in this case, is very clear. I'm not suffering because I can't have what I want. I'm suffering for something that is not possible to get. It's clear. What are the possibilities for me to become pregnant? Die and be reborn as a woman, and then we'll see. I don't see another possibility. Similarly, it's as if it's as if I suffer because the sun actually sets in the. I suffer because the sun sets in the west, and I want it to suffer. I want the sun to set every day in a different direction. So maybe in the east, maybe in the south. I mean, you're not suffering. You're not suffering because you can't get what you want. You're suffering because you want something that's not possible to get. It's impossible. In this present moment, just think of any situation in your life that is not the way you want it to be. Are there situations that are different from how you'd like them to be? I think we all have aspects of our lives, that aspects we'd like to be and that just aren't, things that, related to ourselves, related to others, related to society, physical, emotional, and then we're upset because things are not the way we want them to be. Yes. And we can't get what we want. Yes. But now, what difference is there between our sufferings, and also suffering, um, um, suffering because I can't get pregnant, or suffering because the sun doesn't set in the east. Well, because because the things I want, they they could be possible. Well, they could be, but they're not yet. And if something that I want in the future, if I want something to come about in the future, I want to get something, it's wonderful. Direct yourself there. Try to act so that those things go the way you want them to go. But in this present moment, it's already, the result is already here, and things are perfect the way they are. Perfect in the sense that reality in this present moment, as a fruit of a very complex net of causes and conditions, cannot be different from what it is. Oh, but it would be better if it were different. Okay. But it's not. This present moment is perfect. It's perfect not in the sense that there aren't aspects that don't generate suffering, but if we look at the causes and conditions that brought it to be like that, oh, but if I had created a different cause, of course the result would be different. But in this present moment is not a problem, it's a fact. And it's useless to fight about facts. If I say that I'd like it to be different, I want something to be different in the future, okay, so what do I need to do? I need to interact in such a way to make it different. Oh, I don't have enough money, for example. I'd like to have more money. Okay. What can you do to have more money? You can earn more and spend less. Or is there another possibility? I don't know. So if I say, in this present moment, I don't have enough money. I'd like to have more money. So what do I need to do? I need to spend less and try to do what I can to make more money. Maybe I need to change my job. I need to maybe to work more, find other ways. Many, many things to do. That's not the subject. But if you want to have more money, you need to make more and spend less. But what I have today, it's useless that I complain about not having enough today. Also, not having enough, that depends on I don't have enough to satisfy my desires. Just take away a couple of desires and then you have enough. Take away a few desires and then you won't know what to do with all that money you have. What I mean is, but we should not be fighting with this present moment, because our suffering doesn't come from not having what we want. It comes from wanting what we can't have. For desiring and being attached to a reality that doesn't match the experience of now. I don't know if that's clear. Similarly, it's not true that we suffer because we have to live situations that we don't like. In reality, we suffer because we have aversion. We have aversion to situations that are inevitable, given the causes and conditions that were created. And the third, it's not true that I suffer because I need to be separated from my objects of attachment. I suffer because I don't have a clear awareness of the impermanence of things. Because in the nature of everything that begins sooner or later ends. Everything that gets accumulated sooner or later, everything that gathers separates, and everything that is born dies. If I have this awareness, for example, here I'm drinking water, and I like water so much. Oh, I like it. It's so good. But I know that water is going to end, and I enjoy it to as much as possible. You know, and when I don't have any more, I can say, "Oh, how wonderful that it was there." Not that while I'm drinking it, I'm afraid that it's going to to finish. No, as long as it's there, I'm going to enjoy it to the fullest. So in the second seal, the second point, what the vision, the view that Buddha transmits is that was that we relate to reality in every moment through our attachment, our limited desire, and envy, jealousy, fear, arrogance, and miserliness. This selfishness is described as this obsession with self gratification, with ignorance, which means relating to reality in an inconsistent way. Ignorance is the fact that we live in an impermanent reality that appears to us as being permanent, and we relate to it as if it were permanent. This is a form of ignorance. Another form of ignorance takes us to the third seal, which is we live a reality. Do we live in a subjective or objective reality? Let me ask the question differently. Let's take an example that is a really nice example. We hear this sound. That's clear. Could you hear the sound of the singing bowl? Was that pleasurable or not? I hope that it's pleasurable. Let me do it again. Without analyzing or philosophizing, I mean, did we all hear the same sound or not? Did you hear the singing bowl sound or not? Yes. How many sounds? Was it one or were there many? Without philosophizing. If you ask the person next to you, did you hear the sound of the singing bowl? He's not going to ask, which one, No. Okay, I played twice. No. Okay, how about the third time? Now, I ask you, you ask the person next to you, can you hear the sound of the singing bowl? Yes. Is that clear? Now, let's analyze just a minute. What happens when I touch and I play this singing bowl? Made up of 7 types of metal, that's done by hand. I mean, these vibrations in the air, they come to our ears. Those of you who are watching from home, they go, they go through and come out your speakers at home. It's transformed into sound waves. So we have vibrations in the air. These sound waves, they come into contact with our hearing, our sense power. If I close up my eardrums, I don't hear any more. Why not? Because the sound waves don't come into contact with my hearing, my sense power of hearing. Once they've come into contact with the sense power of hearing, there's a part called the auditive sense consciousness that that has that perception, that sensory sensory perception. Then I can apply my discernment, where I say, this is a singing bell, or this, that, and the other. I give a name to that sound. Are you following? So now, The vibration in the air that comes to my hearing and that goes to you, is it the same or is it different? It's similar, but the distance, you know, given the distance, my distance and in your distance, the sound waves are impacted by the distance. So it's similar, but what is similar by definition is different. And even those of you who, those of you at home, and depending on your speakers or depending on here where you're sitting, depending on your position and how it goes to the ceiling and back, the sound waves that come, the sound waves that get to our ears, our sense power, the sound waves are different. It's not just one sound wave going to all of us in the same way. The sound waves that come to my hearing and the sound waves that go to each one of you, they're different. They're similar because they come from the same object, but the sound waves are different. And what about the sense power, the actual hearing? Mine and each one of yours, they're similar because we're human beings, but are they the same? Some have burned up their eardrums. Maybe they listened to music that was too loud or other noises, or you know. Also our age factors in. Children and adolescents can hear certain frequencies that adults can no longer. So the sense power of each one of us is not the same. Some can hear certain frequencies that others cannot, and these same frequencies are heard differently according to our own sense power. So and what about the sense consciousness? Is it the same or is it different? I imagine it's different. And what about the value we attribute to this sound? Is it the same or is it different? It's different. So, in front of all of this, as I play the singing bell and I ask you, did you hear this sound? The question would be, which one? The one you heard is not the one I heard. Because what you hear, I have a vague idea based on my own perception. But our tendency is, I think that what you hear is what I hear. Isn't that true? When we try to judge an experience of someone else, the method of measure is our own experience, and we don't know how to do differently. So when we observe a sound, that sound, does it exist objectively or subjectively? It's subjective because it depends on where I am, my position, my sense power, my sense consciousness, the value that I give to it with the discernment, my discernment. Now, what I see. Once I was in Milan and I was giving a lesson to children from school who came. They were quite small, 6, 7 years old. At a certain point, and there was this image of Buddha behind me in standing, and a girl, and she said, excuse me, who is the woman standing there with the blue helmet? And with a big smile, I said, you're right. How, in our culture, is the robes that Buddha wears, is it masculine or feminine? For our culture, it's quite feminine, and this blue helmet instead. Can it look like a blue helmet? It can look like a blue helmet. So the little girl, she was not wrong. What happens is, when I see something and I ask you, are you seeing the image of Lama Tsongkhapa at my right and Buddha Shakyamuni at my left? Can you see them or not? The answer is yes. Are you seeing what I see? Without analyzing, one would say, I mean, it's like taking any object. I take this object here, the Dharma wheel. Are you seeing this without analyzing? Yes. But when I ask you, are you seeing this? I mean, the question that I'm asking, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Without analyzing, the answer is yes. But when you say yes, you're thinking that I'm seeing what you're seeing. But now let's analyze this a little bit. How does the vision come through? I mean, the light hits the object and it reflects and comes to our eye sense power. So the light that comes to my eyes and the light that comes to your eyes, is it the same or is it different? So if I do this, obviously I see in a certain way and you see in a different in another. So it seems to be of a certain size, but those of you who are looking from farther away, it's a different size. So the light that comes to your eyes is reflected from the object is different. So so already the object itself is different. What about the eye sense power? Is different. I had a friend who was a graphic artist, and it seemed like he did horrible thing, it was just horrible. And then after years, I found out that he actually was colorblind, or here, if I take off my glasses, obviously I see differently. So our sense power is different, and the sense consciousness, the value given to things is totally different. Like when I ask you, are you seeing the Dharma wheel that I have in my hands? Without analyzing, the answer is yes. But analyzing, the answer, of course, is no. What I see is not what you're seeing. So the reality of what we see is subjective. It's not objective. The same thing happens with smells, with what we touch, with all of our senses. It's pleasurable for one, it's unpleasant for someone else, and the same thing for concepts. What happens in all of this, that even if everything I hear is subjective, everything I see is subjective, everything I perceive with any one of my senses is subjective, it appears to me as being subjective and I'm aware of this subjectivity, or does it appear objectively to me? When I hear the sound or I look at the image, am I aware that it's the sound that I am hearing, or it's the sound? Is it the object and I'm simply looking at it, seeing it? I mean, we have this tendency, our spontaneous way of perceiving reality is as if reality is there, is solid, objective, and we're seeing it. Or are we aware that we are creators of the reality that we perceive in our daily life? Reality, even if it's subjective, it appears to us as being objective. And we relate with reality, with this subjective reality, as if it were objective. This is another form of ignorance. I could be here all day, but let's try to simplify. I mean, as a consequence, I hear the singing bell. I like it. I have a pleasurable feeling. I want that pleasurable feeling to repeat itself. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to do everything I can to hear that sound again, because I'm projecting the cause of my happiness into that sound. So I generate attraction towards it. Coming coming but coming into contact with the same object, does it always generate the same feeling? What if I play this all day long? I mean, is that sensation, is that feeling always the same, or does it gradually change? You know, at a certain point when someone will say, no, stop. You know, this is an example that that same object doesn't generate necessarily the same result, that same sensation. What do we attach to the object or the sensation? We want we want that feeling, we want that sensation, but not being aware that the sensation is is made up of the value attributed, the object, the sense power, the sense consciousness, the discernment, and so we end up generating attraction towards certain objects and aversion towards others. And so we categorize everything objects that generate pleasure and objects that generate pain. And so I have attraction to some and aversion to others. And so this creates a strong reliance, a kind of dependency on these objects. This reliance manifests itself transforms into attachment and miserliness and jealousy and envy and aversion and this makes us suffer. I'm simplifying too much, but try to imagine an object of attraction and an object of aversion. Can you manage? Something that you don't like at all, an object of anger and an object of desire, for example. Okay, can you think of something? Now, without philosophizing, why does that thing make you angry? Because that thing is bad? Because that thing is in and of itself an object of anger? Or am I attributing a certain value to that object? Because that object reflects, reflects negatively the things that I have inside, etc., etc. I mean, it's an object of anger, subjectively or objectively. How does it appear to us? It appears as an object of anger in an objective way. And what about the object of desire? Why is it good? Because it's good, or because is really good, or because I give it that value? No, it's good. So an object of desire appears to us as being objectively as being an object of desire, and same for an object of aversion. At the basis of our feelings like fear and arrogance and envy and jealousy, at the basis is the basis of this is that these objects appear as being objectively objects of aversion or of attraction, and it's not. If we can understand the subjectivity of the object of anger, then that anger would not have a solid basis to exist. The third seal shows that nothing exists objectively. The only thing that exists objectively is the lack of objectivity, because everything that we everything that we perceive through our senses is subjective. We're not able to perceive anything if not through the filters of ourselves. We could spend hours and hours talking about this. This is fundamental to the Buddhist point of view, that everything that I see, everything that I perceive, it's all through the filter of myself. I need to transform that filter. I shouldn't be trying to transform the reality around me. And reality appears as being objective when in reality, when it's actually subjective. The next point, the fourth point, the fourth pillar, the fourth seal. Seal is used, this term is used because in Buddhist philosophy there are many different philosophical schools. These 4 points, they're like 4 stamps, 4 seals that need to be present for it to be considered Buddhism. The first is impermanence. The second is that everything that's impure is of the nature of suffering. The third is that nothing exists. The third one is that all phenomena are empty and lack an inherently existing self. The first one says all composed phenomena are impermanent. The second is all impure phenomena are of the nature of suffering. And all phenomena are empty and lack an inherently existing self. They're empty of an objective reality. They're empty of an autonomous reality as it appears. A reality is not as it appears, which doesn't mean that reality doesn't exist, because we live in a subjective reality that appears objective. So what's the ignorance? Is it to relate to this subjective reality as if it were objective. Wisdom instead is living this subjective reality as being subjective. It's as easy as that. The fourth point, Nyanyenle Depashiwo, beyond suffering is peace, or nirvana is peace. This is a very, very important point. It's the following. Let me try to summarize it. Are we ignorant? I am. I don't know about you. I imagine, yes. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. Are we selfish? In the sense, are we obsessed with this? Obsessed with the I and the my and self-challenging? Do we react with attachment and fear and anxiety and envy? And do we also have love and patience? And we have many aspects. Some generate suffering and some generate well-being. I mean, we're here and pretty badly off in some aspects. I mean, the description of a being in samsara, of which I'm part, is where I say at least I am. I mean, we really don't know who we have in front of us. In Tibetan, there's a sutra that says a being, kansa, is not able to be sure, to judge with certainty another being completely. And doing that is a cause for degeneration of oneself. Because we don't know who we have in front of ourselves. You cannot judge the deepest aspects of the mind of someone else. So I don't really know, but I think. So the description of a being in samsara is a being who is cowardly, childish, and miserable. That's not that's not great. We're cowardly because we're afraid of suffering, and because we're afraid of suffering, we suffer even more. We're infantile, childish, because we're not mature. We're obsessed with our own cherishing, self gratification, and we don't know that selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic. We don't have this maturity, and uh, uh, and um, and we're miserable as a consequence of being cowardly and infantile because we live in the attachment and the fear and the jealousy, etc., etc. And this all generates suffering. Now, I'm not here to say that we don't have these problems, that we don't have our mental defilements, our own sufferings, our traumas, or we all have them. But we're suffering beings in an objective way or in an interdependent way. Our mind, is it frozen, fixed in this state, or is it impermanent? Our being is impermanent, including our mind. As we saw before, it means that if I interact in a certain way, my mind will transform in that way. Geshe Chekawa of the 12th century, he said, the mind is full of defects, but has a great quality. What you teach it, it will follow. You need to insist a little bit, but in the end, it will follow. So what happens is, it's true, we have ignorance and attachment and all the rest, but our mind is malleable. It's interdependent. That means that it transforms according to the interaction. The more I act with anger, the more I will get anger. The more patient I am, the more patient I will be. The more I open my heart to love others, the more easy it will be for me to open my heart and love everyone. The more generous I will become. The more I act with miserliness, the more miserly I'll become. We transform according to the interaction. And this means that if I generate in my life a lifestyle where my physical actions, physical, verbal, and mental create a positive interdependence, I'm gradually transforming myself into that. In that direction. Is it possible to diminish anger and have more patience? Yes. Is it tiresome? Yes. But is it possible? Is it possible that today you don't get angry for things that in the past made you angry? Yes, I've seen this with so many people. Is it possible to be a little less of a slave of our own desires? Is it possible to have less jealousy, have more joy for others, to develop more concentration, have a vision, have a view more consistent with reality? It's possible. What's the limit that we have with the generation of patience and the limit of patience is not having any more anger. So the limit of love is then having no selfishness. So the point here is that gradually we can develop our qualities and as a consequence overcome our states of being that generate suffering. In other words, we are not able to take away filters and perceive reality without filters, but I can gradually clean them. I clean the filter of anger and put on the filter of patience. I can clean the filter of miserliness and put on the filter of generosity. We can change these filters, generating filters that allow ourselves to live in more harmony with ourselves and others. And when we're able to reach these states, which is possible because we are impermanent, interdependent, if we come into a correct interdependence, we need time, yes, but it's possible. We can then reach the so-called nirvana. Nirvana is the state beyond suffering. Nirvana in Tibetan, Yang De, Yang Nila Deba. Yang means suffering. De is past, beyond. Yang De is the brief way to say Nanyan Le Deba. So the state that goes beyond the suffering, beyond suffering, or in Sanskrit, nirvana. This state is possible. It's not a place, but it's an inner state where, using the metaphors that we use today, it's a place where all our filters are clean. We live situations through a state of inner balance and harmony, peace, satisfaction, love, compassion, joy. And this is possible. So, a fundamental point in the view that Buddha transmitted is having trust, having faith in oneself. I can do it. And this is one of the most important points among them all, because Buddha never promised us heaven. Never is there something that is similar to heaven? In Buddhism, yes, it's called the Pure Land. But if I go to a Pure Land with the mental defilements that I have now, we make it hell. I mean, just look at our planet Earth. If it weren't for the selfishness and the mental defilements of men, wouldn't nature offer us everything we need? We're the ones generating wars and conflicts and all the rest. Or is it nature? And it's us. Imagine for a moment a kind of heaven, a beautiful place where everything's perfect the way we want. And imagine we all go there. The entire population of Italy goes, or even just one's own neighborhood, one's own city. Are we going to change that heaven a little bit? Yes. The Buddhist concept of Pure Land is a place where the majority of the beings who live there are beings who have an elevated spirituality. Imagine you go to buy bread in the morning, and the baker is full of love and compassion and wisdom, or we take a taxi and the taxi driver is a being filled of love and wisdom. So imagine a place where most people have a high level of love and wisdom. That's the concept of Pure Land, which it doesn't mean that if I'm reborn in a Pure Land that I get out of my own suffering, but it does mean that I have a positive influence. So what happens is, Buddha never said, I can make you happy, I can take away your suffering. Buddha says, Buddha cannot take away our suffering, take away your suffering or suffering in general, cannot take away suffering the way we take away the dirt, the way we sweep away dirt with a broom. He cannot eliminate mental defilements, the stains of mental defilements, the way one washes away stains with water. What he can do is only show what is to be abandoned and what is to be cultivated, so that everyone can follow his path. Someone might say, but this is tiresome. Yes. Sorry if I say it in this way, but life is tiring, isn't it? I mean, I always thought better to tire for something that brings good results than tire for something that brings bad results, because swimming against the current of our habits is difficult, but it brings positive results. Let's remember that the path is not about going against mental defilements. The path is about generating our qualities, familiarizing ourselves with our qualities. A little bit like, if I see a place that's really dark, I can't eliminate that darkness going against the darkness. I eliminate the darkness by bringing light. But I need to know where the darkness is. And because if I direct the light where the darkness is not, it's not going to be eradicated. So our energy needs to reinforce and generate our qualities. We know we need to know what our mental defilements are, but so physically, verbally, mentally, we need to we should try to not reinforce our negative conditioning, but also generate our positive qualities and help us have this positive beneficial conduct that brings joy to ourselves and others. So as long as to be along our path, we need to open up our hearts and see that every being around us is important to us, because without opening up our hearts, we are not going to be able to be well. We are beings, we're not solitary beings. We are interdependent. The other day, I was at an event that was talking about whales. And they said something that really made me reflect. I mean, how much do we depend on animals on this planet? I mean, we think, oh, well, not so much. But, do we breathe? What's the relationship that exists between us and a whale? It's really quite simple. When we breathe, and I think that happens every once in a while, from what I understood, every 6 breaths, one depends on the Amazonian forest, and 5 depend on the ocean, the plankton on the oceans, and from the photosynthesis. I mean, how does how's oxygen produced? I mean, it's through the photosynthesis, the plants, and the sun. I mean, we learned this at school, but maybe what we didn't learn is that about 1/6 is generated from the forests, and about 5/6 from the ocean itself. Now, what does the whale have to do with this? It's an enormous, enormous animal. Eats a lot, and sorry for the term, but also defecates a lot. What happens with what happens to the excrement of the whale, that goes up and down and then comes back up to breathe, you know? The whale is a mammal. She breathes oxygen. As she goes up and down, she poops, and the whale poop is one of the best fertilizer in the ocean for the plankton, and without the whales, much of the plankton would not survive. The plankton that is essential for the production of oxygen. So what do I have to do with the whale? What does the whale have to do with me? I mean, if I breathe oxygen, it's also thanks to the whale. What do I have to do with the bacteria in my gut? Well, if I'm able to digest my food, it's thanks to them. We are not independent. How important is eating for us? It's fundamental. How many people are there behind a plate of food, a dish? So many. The fact that we're here now, I mean, how much work is behind all this to be able to be here? And we're here nice and warm. So many people are behind this moment. Our well-being depends on an infinite number of beings, just an ocean of beings that allow us to be here now. And there's a fundamental point that the well-being of others is as important, is just as important to us in a society, in a family. What happens in a family? A family of 5. Let's imagine a family of 5 and one person is not well. Does that person influence the others? Yes. The same thing happens in society. So if the other 4 want to be well, they need to help that 5th person as much as possible be well. And then when the 5th person is better, the first one's not feeling well, etc. But what I mean to say is that if others are not well, then if others are not well, it's going to be hard for me to be well. And we're talking on a very coarse, gross level of interdependence among us all. Obviously, if I reach the so-called nirvana and I'm able to be well even in the middle of chaos, but on a more superficial level, which where we are, our well-being depends on the balance of everyone else. And it's an illusion, the fact that I can be happy when the one next to me is suffering. In this world, in this world where we live, unfortunately, that illusion is very firmly rooted, where I live my life, you do yours, you live yours. Once I met a man. It was one of the worst. I don't want to say worst. Yes, one of the worst experiences I've ever met. I was invited on a boat in Brazil. I mean, it was an enormous yacht, and it was like 25 rooms. It was enormous, and there was someone who was the owner. He was the owner of gas and petrol in Siberia, and he asked me to where people invite me to go, I accept. And I was talking to this man, and I said, every year we go to Tibet. Maybe maybe you'd like to come with us. He said, well, he said, well, can I come with my 747? I said, well, there's an airport. I don't know. He said, well, be, you know, well, we do humanitarian work in Nepal, in Tibet. And he said, poor people need to die. Because if someone is poor, it's because they don't know how to become rich. And I didn't even know what else. I didn't know what to answer. In front of such closed-mindedness, it's useless to try to knock on the door. I just wanted I wanted to get away as soon as possible, and I felt very relieved, And I just looking back on some of the situations. There was a very, very heavy energy, but there's this very rooted idea that if someone is not well, it's because they don't know how to be well. I take care of myself, you need to take care of yourself. This is your business. In reality, from my point of view, is that we are interdependent. And the closer people are to me, the more influenced I am, which doesn't mean that those who are far don't influence me. So it's our responsibility to participate and to take care of those around us. And there are two ways to do that. One, with our direct actions towards others, and there are 4 ways to help others. By sharing materially, sharing affection and love, giving material, giving affection and love, giving protection, helping others avoid situations of difficulty, fear, and sharing the Dharma, sharing spiritually. These are the 4 ways that we can help others, and we should do it according to our own abilities. Remember, you can't give something that you don't have. So there's there's a moment of giving, and then there's a moment of accumulating. I can't give love to those near me if I don't have the minimum amount of emotional stability. I can't give the Dharma if I don't have that experience and that knowledge. I can't help you be more patient if I'm always getting angry myself. We can't give what we don't have. So there's a part where we share what we have, and then there's another part where we generate more to then be able to share. Something important is that the more I share, the more I get. Even St. Francis, in the simple prayer, he said it's by giving that we receive. The more love I get, the stronger my love becomes. The more protection I give, the more sure and secure I feel. The more I can share the Dharma, the more the Dharma will grow along in my path. Even materially, the more you share, the more you have. I remember Lama Ganchen was always a perfect example of this. He was never without, but every time that he had anything in his hands, it would just, it would just flow through his hands. I remember once someone said, I want to help you. I want to help you materially. I want to give you a hand. I have a lot of respect for you. But you need to change the way that you manage money. You can't just spend everything that you have. I mean, money should be invested, there are interest, and and then you can spend what you make. So, like for example, if I give you 1 million, it's what at the times this person said that I'll give you 1 million. You know, I'll give you 1 million. You put it in the bank, and this money will generate this amount of ignorance, and you can use that money. And this person, and then Rinpoche said, "Thank you. If you want to give me something, and I have the freedom to use it the way I think best, then thank you." And what happened at the time was a time where all the money, all the money that arrived once a year, Rinpoche would just he would empty out all the accounts to give the money give the money in Nepal and in India. Um, so because the money was um, changed into rupees. I remember this boy, who like had a suitcase, was just because this they would go everywhere with them with the money to help people, the people who were sick, people who these villages needed this, but he or this monasteries, whatever. I don't. How many times? I mean, how many times do Rinpoche not have money to pay our bills here? And, to do something like this, one needs to have his own crazy wisdom. I'm not saying that you should empty out your bank accounts to give, but my point is when you give, it comes back to you. When you have this attitude, to this of sharing, it makes money move. It comes back to you. Lama Genshin taught me this from day one. Always did this with this great generosity. So along our path, there'll be a time we'll understand that we need to share, that the happiness of others is important. Now, I allow myself to do a kind of ad, a publicity ad, because our path in helping others is the most important thing, and we can't help everyone everywhere, but we can do what where we find ourselves. We can, and in this last time, during this lockdown period, the situation in Brazil is very, very difficult because we're in a very quite rich society that has the structure to be able to close things down. Instead, in Brazil, there's more and more people on the streets. I've talked to some friends. I talked to a friend in Brazil that you see an amazing number of people on the street, and you can see that they're people that have not been on the street for a long time, haven't always been there. They've lost their jobs, they lost their house, and just people who are just not able to eat. And so we've started to in Brazil, it's something called a cesta básica. It's like a kit of food. It's like a basket of food, from the necessary food for one family for 1 month. So we're distributing this food where it's most needed. And it's like 12 euros for 1 month for one family. It's not something. So now we're collecting money to help these families as much as we can. So I invite you to say, oh, it's an action connected to us. I mean, there's it's our Dharma Center in Brazil, who's actually physically going to these communities and is helping these people who have found themselves now on the street. And so we're doing this campaign to help them. But but in but the Brazilians themselves, the they're not able to to sustain the campaign so well because they're having financial troubles as well in this period. So they said, let's open this up to Europe as well. So as much as you can, in this YouTube video, we are putting this link so to show where you can help. So those of you who are interested in helping, sorry, this we need to organize it a little bit. The idea just came to me very recently to open this up. So help support these families in great needs. So this is like a little bit of a pause, for advertising ad. But we shouldn't feel at all forced. If you want to do it, it's with joy. The limit of your own possibilities, of course. So to conclude, Buddhism, from my point of view, is a tool that's made up of three parts. There's a worldview that we talked about today, in general terms, and then there are the rules of conduct. What should one do and what should one avoid to reach that so-called state of nirvana, that state of so-called nirvana. So what do I want? What behavior do I want to abandon? What behavior do I want to cultivate? And that third part, there are tools to help us develop our inner qualities. And these are the techniques of the meditational techniques. There's the meditation, all the symbolism. There's also mantra recitation. There's so many tools. And there's a wealth because some like philosophy more. That some prefer to recite mantras. I mean, there's something for everyone. Maybe both together. Or also, we have tools that are meant to help us increase our qualities. And for our so there's our worldview. There's conduct. Maybe someone says, "Well, can a Buddhist do this? What should a Buddhist not do there?" Well, there's nothing that a Buddhist can't do, but a Buddhist with awareness should probably avoid doing certain things. We should observe what is good for us, what is harmful to us, cultivate what is beneficial, and abandon what is harmful. So, for example, for rules of conduct, one shouldn't lie. Did Buddha say that lying is harmful? Yes, but if one lies, does that mean you are no longer Buddhist? No. With awareness, we learn that lying generates suffering and should be abandoned. We should avoid violence, avoid killing. I mean, there's many things that one should avoid and other things that should be cultivated. So those are the rules of conduct. And then there are techniques. We've got meditation and studying philosophy, the mantras, the Buddhist psychology, and then little by little, one starts to know. And someone can ask, well, where do I start? You start by getting close. So the way, you get close to it, like you would a friend, you get close to it like a friend. So we get to know each other. You create faith, a trust, and love. And then at a certain point, when you have that love, you have that trust, then you can do everything together. So first one needs to create this closeness, learn how to trust, have a certain attraction, kind of fall in love with the Dharma. And from that moment, one can um, one can study the three principal aspects of the path of self-healing. There's so many things that one can do, but it's something that comes from the heart more than the test, the head. Um, you know, just and the same way, you can also have a path. You know, you you can have a path where you spend all your time and you never sit down to meditate, because you're studying the philosophy, or those who love to memorize all the prayers and love to practice says in the ceremonies and the meditations. And when if you can put them all together, the prayers and the symbolism and the philosophy, then you can integrate them all. But there's not a precise starting point. We're not here to become Buddhists, and my objective, or the objective of the center, is not to make everyone Buddhists, but is to share what this path that Buddha transmitted to us, and make our lives better, make the lives of others better. So starting from inside, going outside. And being Buddhist is a tool. It's a means. It's not an end in itself. We're going to stop here. We're going to stop for lunch, and at 3:30, for those of you who want to participate, there'll be the refuge. It'll be a taking of refuge where we formalize this desire of following this path as a path. It's something very personal. Normally, it's not done publicly, but given given how things are now and how busy I am with the temple and everything, I've chosen one day a month to offer this possibility to everyone. You can come. If you've already taken refuge, you can renew your vows, or if you're just curious, you can come. If you take refuge for the first time, so, and also for those of you at home, I'm going to prepare a link for those of you who are here. Give you this link for those of you who want to help Brazil. Let's try to be a positive interdependence in the world. Now it's time for our prayers, dedications.
Lame kutse rapten chin namkara tinle chokchur gepa dan losan tempe drume sasumgi drove munsela takto ne gyurchi kewa kuntu yanda lama dan dralme cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yönte rabzone Dorje change kopa nyurtobe sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shing ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumki jingi lo kuncho sumki ngodrubot sol kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or during the day, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Grazie a tutti. Buon appetito. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good lunch.